In this episode, we're going to talk about something that I have put out there in our ebook and I've put out there in podcast or blogs. We're going to talk about it on one of our podcasts, and that is the 3 pillars of instructional design. So we are very familiar with the various instructional design models like ADDIE and SAM and others. The problem that I have with all of those is, in my opinion, they aren't real instructional design models. They're iterative models, right? And those are fine, and we should have them, that we need to have a cycle. But what we refer to at Legacy Learning Consulting as our instructional design process is the 3 pillars of instructional design. And so this is literally the process that we go through for every learning experience that we create. And we're putting it out there because we really think that, and we've experienced it, that this is the most efficient way to create really valuable, meaningful learning experiences that shift behavior. We recognize one of the things when I first started in this field that I realized is that there's a bunch of learning experiences, no matter who you're working for, whether it's a client or you're working from W-2, there's a ton of learning experiences that need to be created. And so you have to have an efficient process to get that created. Right? We used to do Legacy Learning Consulting, as we're getting busier, we're not able to do this so much, but we used to be able to go from concept to delivery, regardless of the format, in a week using this model. So this model helps you to create really valuable learning experiences really fast. And so the 3 pillars for Legacy Learning Consulting's instructional design process is outcomes, content, and experience. And it happens in that order. So the first thing that we do is, of course, we get a learning strategy together. But after that, we're ready to create some learning experiences. The first thing that we do is figure out what are those behavioral outcomes. What do we want our learners to do at the end of that learning experience? Those are generally 3 to 6 behaviors that we can clearly articulate that if somebody were to engage in all of those behaviors, that we would think that they're being successful with this learning experience. And so there's a couple components to that. You can certainly apply all the SMART principles if you want to those. But for us, we just want to make sure that they are observable, that it's something that you can imagine and see and feel and touch. Like, hey, I can see that person was able to write an Excel formula. I don't know why I always use Excel, probably because it's just easiest for me to think of these examples on the fly. But that they can write an Excel formula. I know what success would look like with that. I'll have to figure out what the formula should look like in order to be able to have a metric for it, but I can do that, right? And then you want to make sure that it's complete and thorough. And so when we look at the outcomes for a learning experience, we say, is that everything? Or are those all the behaviors that we would expect to see when a learner, in order for a learner to be successful? And is it thorough? Are they detailed enough that we can clearly see what the learning experience, what success in this learning experience looks like? So we are radical about outcomes at Legacy Learning Consulting because we believe that the outcomes have a significant impact, in fact, vital impact on the actual learning experience, right? So if you get the outcomes wrong, your learning experience could be watered down, it could be the wrong format, it could be the wrong content, because if you look at our next thing, it's the content. And so we literally go with each outcome and we say, what's the information that a learner needs to know in order to be able to do those outcomes or be able to achieve those outcomes? Right? So literally outcome by outcome, that's where we go get our content and our information. We either map existing content or we see, hey, the content doesn't exist and we need to create that. So at this stage, the content step of the content pillar, we ask, what's the information the learner needs to know in order to be able to do? And then we create or curate that. Now, this is the part that we usually struggle with our SMEs, but the outcomes really help us to be able to have some of these conversations. So if you're having a ton of challenges with your SMEs, start with your outcomes and get really religious about those outcomes. Outcomes essentially become the scope, right? If a SME is asking for additional information and it doesn't align to an outcome, there's only 2 possibilities. Either we got our outcomes wrong and, hey, SME, let's help me figure out what we need to do on those outcomes to get those right, or it's not needed in this learning experience, right? And so it allows you to have those conversations. So when you're looking at the content, you want to make sure that you're asking yourself, what do learners need to know to achieve the outcomes and nothing more, right? We don't want to give that those kitchen sink learning experiences. So only tie the information you're providing in a learning experience to those outcomes. And the third pillar is the fun pillar, right? It's often where a lot of the instructional designers start, is they start thinking about, oh, what's this experience going to be? Is it going to be gamification? Is there going to be a game? Is it going to be a scenario? Is it going to be a live session? Is it going to be a simulation? That happens after we have our outcomes, right? And so the experience is the thing that we create where learners actually use. So several things to consider in this one, and I'm going to wrap this one up, is how do learners receive the information? So you've got to figure out in the experience phases, how am I going to put the information in front of the learners? Is that going to be through a didactic kind of like, hey, here's this? Or strategy I love is you ask them a question, and then whenever they get it, respond in a certain way, you give them additional information to fill that gap, because that helps with creating relevance. The other thing you want to consider is what are learners going to do with that information? So remember, learning is behavioral. That learning is something you have to do. So once you give information, what are they going to do? Are they going to literally play with it and practice it? Are they going to reflect on what that might look like? Are they going to reflect on the challenges that they anticipate? Are they going to identify specific insights that are new to them? So you got to figure out, what do you want learners to do with that information? And then, so important, because at Legacy Learning Consulting, we define learning as experience plus reflection. So when you're at this experience phase, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to prompt reflection? And you can do that throughout your learning experiences, or you can just do it at the end. But you want to make sure that you keep the reflection. So the three pillars of our instructional design process is outcomes, content, and experience. Hope this helped.